Bonilla, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Butler, Calderon, Campos, Carter, Cedillo, Chesbro, Conway, Cook, Davis, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ng, Fewer, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Furutani, Galgiani, Garrick, Gatto, Gordon, Gorell, Grove, Hagman, Halderman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Hueso, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Lara, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mansour, Mendoza, Miller, Mitchell, Monning, Morrell, Nestandi, Nielsen, Norby, Olson, Pan, Perea, V. Manuel Perez, Portantino, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Swanson, Torres, Valadeo, Wagner, Wykowski, Williams, Yamada. Mr. Speaker.
Members, a quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask Assembly Member Gordon to offer the day's prayer.
Lord, we glorify you this day, for you have created us to live together in a community. We also thank you today, Lord, for Martin Luther King Jr., and for all those who believe that people should be judged by the color, not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Let your love, Lord, and the respect we show to one another guide our character. Let your love spread throughout our communities so that all are welcomed, all are valued, and all will know wholeness and well-being. Amen.
We ask our guests to continue to remain standing and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assemblymember Allen as he leads us in the pledge. Mr. Allen. You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Wednesday, January 19, 2011. The Assembly met at 7 a.m. Honorable Paul Cook, Assembly Member, 65th District, presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dotson Wilson at the desk. File Clerk Russell C. Tomas reading. Roll call. The following were placed upon the morning roll call: 75, Ashaji, Alejo, Allen, Almiana, Atkins, Bell, Berry Hill, Block, Blumenfield, Bonilla, Bradford, Brownlee,
Mr.
Buchanan.
Calderon moves and Mr. Hagman seconds. At the meeting of the previous day's journal will be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. The absences for the day will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Mr. Calderon, you are recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker and members, I request unanimous consent for Assemblymember Davis to have guests and photographers on the floor today for today's observance of Martin Luther King Jr. holiday.
Without objection.
Also, I request unanimous consent to allow Assemblymember Hagman to speak on Adjourn in Memory today.
Without objection. We have some guest introductions today. Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, if I could have your attention, it's my pleasure this morning to introduce some of my constituents from the organization Oceana, founded in 2001. It's the largest international nonprofit organization focused solely on ocean conservation. With us in the upper tier here, Susan Murray, Director of the Pacific, Jeff Chester, California Program Director, Whit Shared, Pacific Council and Senior Advisor, and Ashley Blacko, Pacific Policy and Communications Coordinator. Please welcome our friends from Oceana. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to take the liberty of recognizing a couple more elected officials. My friend Joey Luis, Vice Mayor of the City of Clear Lake, in the gallery. Christopher Mateo, City of Lathrop, Vice Mayor, and also Omar Ornelas, Council Member, City of Lathrop. Welcome. Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would also like to introduce up and coming from the city of Pomona, Councilmember Freddie Rodriguez is in the back of the chamber. Councilmember Rodriguez serves as a paramedic in Diamond Bar area. So thank you for allowing me to introduce Councilmember Rodriguez and his wife, Michelle Rodriguez, in the balcony.
Mr. Calderon.
So, Madam Speaker, members, I request unanimous consent to allow Mr. Allen, Assemblymember Allen, to adjourn in memory.
Without objection. Okay, Mr. Allen, your adjourn in memory.
Madam Speaker and members, I wish to adjourn today's session in memory of Paul Battisti, who died in January after a long battle against cancer. Mr. Battisti was a former Napa County supervisor who also, during his career, ran the California Veterans Home. He passed away at the age of 88. He dedicated his life to the citizens of Napa and to improving conditions for the veterans at the Yountville home. He championed flood control for Napa and is survived by his wife Connie and his 8 children. In addition, Madam Speaker, we wish to adjourn today in memory of Peter Kingston. Peter Kingston had an untimely death at 57, unexpected, longtime spouse and partner to Supervisor Shirley Zane in Sonoma County. So I do wish to adjourn in their memory. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Okay. Mr. Alejo, you have guests you'd like to recognize? Mr. Alejo.
Members, thank you. I'm here to welcome several distinguished local elected officials from my district. Here with us today is the mayor from this wonderful city of Watsonville, Mayor Daniel Dodd Sr., Council Member Eduardo Montesino, Council Member Bill Neighbors, City Manager Carlos Palacios, and City Council Member from the great city of Soledad, Alejandro Chavez. We can welcome him, please.
Okay, members, we will now move to the resolution relative to Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Without objection, we will take up file item 3, ACR 5, Davis. Now the clerk will read.
Assembly concurs with resolution number 5 relative to Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Mr. Davis, you may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members of the august body of the California State Assembly. This morning I rise to commemorate and to recognize January 17th as the birthday and day to honor Dr. Martin Luther King. As we know, the United States of America has designated the King Weekend in commemoration of his life. He is the only citizen who is not an elected official to have a national holiday. In this body of the State Assembly, we have taken the leadership in the early 1980s in September to honor him under the leadership of then Speaker Willie Brown, and the member of our body was then Elihu Harris, making us one of the first states to recognize Dr. Martin Luther King's Day as a holiday. Why then is Dr. Martin Luther King an appropriate American citizen in which we should honor, or to whom we should give credit and recognition? Dr. King grew up in the segregated South, and it was the institution of segregation that developed who he was as a person. What he sought to do, and his mission, was to make America what it ought to be. We have in the Constitution the statement that all men are created equal, and King sought to make sure that we dissolve the two systems of separate but equal, because they inherently were separate but unequal. In 1954, he had the pleasure of going to Ghana, West Africa, and seeing the freedom of African people in that nation. And it became the stage upon which he stood to seek to begin to publicly call to question this system of segregation in America. And in 1955, a year later, Rosa Parks set in the bus company of Montgomery, Alabama, better known as the Montgomery Bus Boycott. It was a public demonstration that connected both public policy and economic development. Why? Because we discovered that the very then called Negroes that could not sit on the front of the bus were disproportionately the economics that kept the bus company going. How so did we discover this? Because as Negroes failed to ride on the bus, eventually after months, the Montgomery Bus Boycott resulted in the bankruptcy of the transportation system in Montgomery, Alabama. And so there is a connectedness between the people who could not go on the bus and the funding that they provided to keep the bus going. But most of all, in summary, Madam Speaker and members, this challenge that King had to join both public policy and economic development became a powerful tool throughout his entire career. And so we are so proud of his challenge to America, and each of us of all cultures continue to use this tool as we fight for justice for people, no matter what the disparate area, whether it be racial equality, whether it be sexual identity and issues of rights for those people, marital status, religious preference, you name it. It is important that we make America what it ought to be. And so today, Madam Speaker, I would also like to ask for those who would like the privilege of being co-authors to be able to join in on this resolution as we commemorate an ordinary citizen who did extraordinary things.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in support of this resolution. In commemoration of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I've given each of you a book of quotations by Dr. King. Today is an opportunity for us all to reflect on his life, his work, and his legacy. We all have our favorite quotes from Dr. King. The eloquence and force of his words have not only withstood the test of time, they've given life and hope to the aspiration of millions of Americans and millions more across the world. My favorite quote is, "An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. I think this quote is an elegant statement of what it is to be an American. We're all tied together, and as Dr. King continued, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Dr. King's goal and the goals of the broader civil rights movement must be understood in their complete context. The struggle was not just about securing voting rights for Southern blacks, abolishing Jim Crow, or even passing anti-lynching laws. These issues were important, and they were a critical first step, but they were symptoms of a broader issue that Dr. King and the civil rights movement aimed to correct. The struggle for civil rights was about ensuring the realization of justice for every person in this country, regardless of their background, and in every aspect and every facet of their lives. Dr. King defined justice as full equality in the political arena, the social arena, and most importantly, economic justice. This was a crucial point. In fact, the most crucial point, that full equality couldn't be achieved until every person in this country had the opportunity to find decent quality jobs that would allow them to live their American dream. It's fitting then that the most iconic moment of the civil rights movement was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Permission to use a prop?
Without objection.
I have here a copy of the program from August 28, 1963. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom listed several objectives as follows: to demand the passage of effective civil rights legislation which will guarantee to all decent housing, access to all public accommodations, adequate integrated education, and the right to vote; to prevent compromise or filibuster against this legislation; to demand a federal massive works and training program to put all employed workers, black and white, back to work; to demand a Fair Employment Practices Act which bars discrimination by federal, state, and municipal governments, by employers, by contractors, employment agencies, and trade unions; and to demand a national minimum wage which would include all workers of not less than $2 per hour. On a side note, $2 per hour in 1963 is equivalent to $14.25 today. The struggle for social and economic and political equality is interlinked, which is why Dr. King spent the final days of his life marching with sanitation workers. He was in Memphis to stand in solidarity with those workers who are being denied their right to collectively bargain. Dr. King marched with them, and it was in Memphis where he delivered his final prophetic speech. It was in Memphis where he spoke of having been to the mountaintop and having seen the promised land. On Monday, several of us in Los Angeles were attending the Martin Luther King parade, and we had the honor of meeting two of the sanitation workers who were on strike in Memphis when Dr. King was assassinated, Alvin Turner and Barter Leach. Both of these men spoke of their experience with Dr. King, and Mr. Turner in particular paid the highest tribute to Dr. King when he spoke of that speech. And he said that at the time he didn't understand fully what Dr. King meant when he said he saw the promised land, but that on further reflection he knew that Dr. King must have seen his three daughters, one who went on to serve and just retire from the United States Navy, another who became a doctor, and the third who's vice president of Spelman College. He said that Dr. King saw those girls and millions more like them living in a world where they'd have the opportunity to succeed. That is his final and ultimate legacy, that one day our country would recognize and value the contributions of every American, regardless of their background. It's a legacy that strengthened and made more beautiful the garment that is our country. It's a legacy of profound significance, and it's a legacy that we need to cherish and honor as we're called upon to meet some difficult challenges in the coming weeks and months. In doing so, we too can strengthen our network of mutuality and make ours a more perfect union. I ask for an aye vote on this resolution.
Ms. Conway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in support of ACR 5. I welcome this occasion to pay tribute to a great man who compelled our nation to live up to its highest ideals. Our nation was born in the belief that everyone is equal. Yet just as we struggle to obtain our collective freedom, our nation struggled to bestow individual freedom to its citizens. Dr. King showed us the path and persuaded us to follow him. Our nation's great leaders, including Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. and President Lincoln, have beseeched us to follow the light to the promised land. No segregation, no discrimination, no hatred, no violence. Instead, equality, opportunity, justice. Those lessons resonate today. Our nation has been blessed by many great thinkers and many great leaders like Dr. King. His legacy is indelible in the course of American progress, walking in the footsteps of civil rights leaders before him and guiding those who would follow. He earned a distinct place in our hearts. Dr. King stood for justice, justice for all. Dr. King pursued justice by appealing to our best instincts, not our worst. A hero, he stood for nonviolence, and he taught us to recognize the pure beauty of debate and democracy. Look at how our nation has changed because of Dr. King's leadership and inspiring ideas and actions. Not a day goes by without his influence. More needs to be done, but we can take this moment, this day, to recognize how far we have come toward Dr. King's dream. I join my colleagues in honoring this remarkable life. May God bless Dr. King, Mrs. King, his family, and all of those who listened to his words. His words and calls to community service bless the United States of America, and I am honored by that and honored with all of you to be here today. Thank you.
Ms. Hayashi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. On behalf of the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus, I am honored to rise in support of ACR 5. Each year, we pay tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., who changed the world with his dreams, his words, and his actions. As a country, we become united, celebrating his incredible courage and his remarkable leadership. Dr. King inspired and energized the people, and he moved thousands to action through his own example of nonviolent protest. He suffered terrible hardships for his beliefs and paid the ultimate price so that someday we could have an African-American president of the United States. This legacy of Dr. King can be seen in this chamber as we stand side by side in the most diverse state legislature in the country. And I know that my being here as the first Korean American woman to serve in the California state legislature is due to his vision and the openness he created in the hearts and minds of Americans. In his short lifetime, Dr. King moved a nation, and his words and his incredible depth of character continue to influence each new generation of Americans. The Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday gives us an opportunity to carry on his work to achieve peace and equality. With January 17, 2011 marking the 25th anniversary of the King holiday, ACR 5 is a most appropriate demonstration of our respect for Dr. King Jr. On behalf of the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus, I respectfully request an aye vote today. Thank you.
Mr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in support as the chair of the Latino Caucus. I want to thank Senator Member Mike Davis for introducing this resolution to honor a great leader, a wise teacher, a true visionary, that who is Dr. Martin Luther King. Many people in our community don't realize that blacks and Latinos share a common history which is deeply rooted in California's history. We have gone through similar experiences of institutional racism and have dealt with educational and economic marginalization. Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement serve as a model for principled leadership and forward thinking. He fought to change public policy from the self-inflicted wound of segregation to a pluralistic and diverse democracy. In similar fashion, Cesar Chavez modeled his organization activities and techniques as the ones that Dr. King used. Cesar was profoundly influenced by Dr. King's nonviolent philosophy. The movements which awoke both African-American communities and Latino communities served to achieve certain progress in the civil rights movement, and they worked parallel. The lasting legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King will undoubtedly continue to guide those advocating for the poor and the underserved. It is with great pleasure that I ask you to join me in honoring the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and support ACR 5. Thank you.
Mr. Amiano.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and colleagues. And as the outgoing chair of the LGBT caucus, I can't tell you how significant the commemoration of Martin Luther King is to that community. It's a rainbow community made up of different colors and different class backgrounds and different attitudes. However, there were some parallels in history that apply to the oppression of the LGBT community. I also want to thank the Legislative Black Caucus for putting on an excellent event this morning. Very meaningful dialogue, and homage was paid to Jerry Brown, Willie Brown, and James Brown. A breath of inspiration. And Ms. Mitchell did say something that resonates very well in the LGBT community, which is say it proud and say it loud. I think that Martin Luther King's ideas are timeless. So was he ahead of his time? Yes, in many ways, particularly when it came to a gentleman named Bayard Ruskin, who in those days the Times was not ready for, but Martin Luther King's inner circle was with education. You can talk to Dolores Huerta sometime about being in the room with all of them, which I think is quite astounding. And, coming to terms with Mr. Bayard's homosexuality, at the same time, his significant contribution, particularly to the march and the I Had a Dream, the I Had a Dream presentation. So it is with great humility I ask for support of this resolution. Harvey Milk took his inspiration from MLK, particularly the embracement of nonviolence. That really means a lot to all of us. And I know if Dr. King were alive today, Mr. Obama's ascension to the White House would be tremendously meaningful, and he could also tell him how to get through some of the double standard people are throwing at him. Thank you very much.
Colonel Cook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, for the new members, I must tell you, I don't speak very often. I give very few floor speeches. But this obviously is a very special occasion. 77 years ago, our fathers, our forefathers, I know it said in the famous speech it was our fathers, but it was our forefathers. They brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. The author of that speech, as everybody knows, was Abraham Lincoln. And I belong to that party of Abraham Lincoln, the party of reform, the party at one time of change. But was Lincoln right? I'm also a historian, and when you read and you hear that concept that the proposition, that all men and women, which we think of collectively, were created equal, For 400 years, if you studied what happened to black men, women, and children that came over on slave ships in the early 17th century, right up to now, it's been a constant struggle. Even when Lincoln spoke those words in November of 1863 to commemorate the dead at Gettysburg, he had already promulgated the Emancipation Proclamation, the great emancipator, right? No. All it did was free the slaves in those states that were still in rebellion. You know, you had states like Maryland, Delaware, Missouri, Kentucky, where it didn't apply to the North. And I'm not here to bash Abraham Lincoln because, as I said, I still think he was the greatest president. But it was that mindset and that culture. Now, I'm a white man, and I'm getting up here and I'm talking about Martin Luther King. Will I ever have the experience that some of you in the audience have had? Never. Never. But I'm a historian. You know, I was a product of the 60s. 1963, some of you weren't even born. That's very, very scary to me and some of us older members here. But 1963, you know where I was? I was in college. And I was teaching at Ivy Street School, New Haven, Connecticut, on the corner of Winchester Avenue and Ivy Street. Yes, and I did my student teaching there, 5th grade. I was the only white person in that class. And you want to hear back then, that same time frame of the struggles? Why? Because of this history of inequality all these years? Why are we still talking about it? Why on this day are we commemorating it? Why is it so significant as opposed to we don't do other presidents or what have you? Because the battle is not over. And perhaps more than anyone else, you know, it's very hard to go back in history and say, Frederick Douglass was the Martin Luther King of his time. And he was. But Martin Luther King, he was, you want to talk about somebody that, at least from my perspective, understood this history. You know, there's a reason today why we don't graduate a higher percentage of blacks, why we have crime, why we have poverty. And if we as whites don't understand that, we are never going to empathize and change some of these policies.
30 seconds.
I'm sorry. So, Martin Luther King, as I said, everyone knows his history, the speaker, better individuals, orators than myself have talked to him. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us to continue what he started. You know, he had a dream. He also had a vision. He had a plan. But he had more courage than I can ever envision. If you look at this book, just visualize yourself going up against a fire hose or a German Shepherd in Selma, Alabama, or having your church or school dynamited, or your relatives or your friends lynched, or you yourself martyred. This is perhaps a historic day. It's one that, as an individual, the great crusader, we can never forget. I ask for your support on this resolution.
Mr. Davis, you may close.
Madam Speaker and members, as I close, I think that we should be mindful of the risk and tragedy that occurs in public service, as in the case of the Congresswoman and judge and other citizens in Arizona. And Dr. Martin Luther King's life, as we commemorate him, is also an equal early example of how risky public service is. I give you this parting brief story that in his first book that he had written, he was in New York, and as he was answering the question of a lady who happened to have been deranged in some way, she said, "Are you Dr. Martin Luther King?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And the next thing he knew, he was bleeding, and he was rushed to Harlem Hospital. And when he got to the hospital and the operation was complete, he was convalescing in his hospital room. And he read the New York Times, and it simply stated that if, in fact, he had sneezed, because the knife was just inches away from his aorta, that if he had sneezed, he would have drowned in his own blood. And in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, he said this: "If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around in 1960 when students all over the South were sitting in lunch counters, changing America in terms of those who can go to restaurants. If I had sneezed in 1961, I wouldn't have been around for what we call freedom rides, where we ended discrimination in this country in interstate travel. If I had sneezed, I would not have been around in 1962 when the Negroes of Albany, Georgia protested for equality, straightening their backs up. And when a man straightens his back up, no one can lean on it. And if I had sneezed in 1963 when black people from Birmingham, Alabama brought in the Civil Rights Bill that went to Congress on its way for passage. If I had sneezed in late 1963, in August of that year, I would not have been around for the March on Washington, delivering the speech, "I Have a Dream." And finally, if I had sneezed in 1968, I would not have been around to fight for the dignity of the garbage workers in Memphis, Tennessee. Madam Speaker and members, I finally say, Dr. King's quote, anybody can be great, because anyone can serve, because everybody can be great. You don't need a PhD to serve, and you don't need to know Einstein's theory on relativity to serve. The only thing you need is a heart and a soul generated by love. I ask for your aye vote on ACR 5.
Seeing and hearing no further discussion or debate, we will move to a vote on the issue, on the measure. Mr. Davis asked for a first roll to be open for co-authors. The first roll call will be open for co-authors on ACR 5. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 71, no 0. There's ayes 71 co-authors on the measure. Our final roll call will be on the bill. We can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Okay, we have a few more guests in the chambers. Ms. Galgiani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to introduce our former mayor and elected city council members from the cities of Livingston and Lathrop, Gurpal Samra, and our other council members. Thank you very much.
Mr. Donnelly, you have guests in the chambers as well. Mr. Donnelly.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker and Assembly members. I ask you to rise and honor Hesperia City Council members Russ Blewett and Bill Holland. Thank you.
Mr. Bradford.
I'm sorry. Good morning, members. We will now move the Assembly observance for Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. Since 1986, our nation has set aside Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday as a time of reflection on the principles in equality, for racial equality, and nonviolent change. But not just on reflection, but on embracing the issues and the character that Dr. King embraced and lived. Had this great man lived, he would be 81 years of age this year. I challenge us every day to embrace Dr. King's principles, his work ethic, his vision, but not just to embrace them, we have to live them every day. And I'm left with a quote by Dr. King. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in a time of challenge and controversy. The true neighbor will risk his position, his prestige, even his life for the welfare of others. In dangerous valleys and hazardous pathways, he will lift some bruised and beaten brother to a higher and more noble life. That's our challenge as legislators here in the state of California, as leaders all over America, as Americans, that's our challenge. Will we now move to the rear special presentations? Please direct your attention to the rear of the chamber, where Vice Chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, Assemblyman Mike Davis, will make presentations. Mr. Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members of the State Assembly. It is our honor to present two honorees whose work commemorates Dr. Martin Luther King through the service that they have given. First is our first Civil Rights Leadership Award in law, which goes to Ms. Areva Martin. She has known audiences across the country for her regular appearances on the Dr. Phil Show, as well as national stints on Fox News, NPR, court television, and radio television. She is one of the television's most in-demand legal experts and analysts, the founding and manager partner of Martin & Martin Law Firm. In addition to positioning her firm as one of the premier African-American female-owned firms in L.A., Areva has developed a multi-disciplined civil practice which serves some of the nation's top corporations, nonprofit organizations, governmental entities, and high net worth individuals. She is the president and co-founder of Special Needs Network, a nonprofit launched specifically to support families with special needs children. In addition, being sought after as a legal expert, she is known as an inspiring author. Her second book, The Everyday Advocate, is scheduled for release soon. It's already been released, quite actually. And her first book was Journey to the Top, and it is a must-read for female professionals interested in achieving ultimate career success. Areva, among all of her accomplishments, is a graduate with honors from the University of Chicago and Harvard Law School. She is a member of the Los Angeles County Bar, American Bar Association, and Black Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles. She originally is a native of St. Louis, Missouri, but currently resides in Los Angeles, and of course, she's our own. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Areva Martin. Mr. Speaker and members, our final honoree is the Outstanding Civil Rights Leadership Award and Community Action, and it goes to Ms. Linda Creighton. For over 30 years, Linda Creighton has dedicated herself to serving the community and her church. Throughout her personal life and professional career, Linda has consistently made education, youth empowerment, women's issues, homelessness, hunger, and community service, along with the quality of life of local residents, a top priority. As president of the District 5 Mental Health Board in the Sunset District of San Francisco, Linda provided much needed support and leadership to the city of San Francisco, restructured by the Department of Health. Linda was recognized by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors with a leadership award for her efforts, and she has successfully chaired the San Francisco Mayor's Women's Summit for the former mayor of San Francisco, Willie L. Brown, drawing more than 5,000 women at that event. In 1996, Linda was appointed to the San Francisco Airports Commission by Mayor Willie Brown and is currently serving on the commission today. This is just a few of the many accomplishments and awards she has received. Linda is a regional senior director of government relations for her employer, Comcast, with responsibilities for advocacy in all of 9 Bay Area counties. Senator Parada, President Pro Tem, has named Linda as Woman of the Year for the 9th Senatorial District in 2006. Linda is dedicated to the care of her mother suffering from Alzheimer's. Linda is widowed and proud mother of 1 son, Kevin Evans. Why don't you join me in welcoming the recognition of Linda Creighton? This concludes our recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I just want to thank everyone for the participation in today's program and congratulate our honorees, Ms. Martin and Ms. Creighton, and memberships for your participation in Assembly's observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Observance of his birthday and celebration of his life. Again, we ask you to stand up, speak up, show up, as Dr. King did. This concludes our ceremony in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Business on the daily file, there is none. We'd like to recognize Ms. Olson's birthday today. Happy birthday, Ms. Olson. The session schedule is as follows. Friday, January 21st, no floor session, no check-in session. Monday, January 24th, floor session at 12 noon. Tuesday, January 25th, check-in session. Wednesday, January 26th, check-in session. Thursday, January 27th, floor session at 9 a.m. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. We will keep the desk open to receive a proclamation from the governor. I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves, Mr. Hagman seconds, that this House stands adjourned until Monday, January 24th at 12 noon. Quorum call is lifted.